The return of Olympic great Mo Farah to competition on the streets of London on May the 2nd has turned a lot of heads as he was beaten by a relatively unknown club runner by the name of Ellis Cross. With such an amount of time away, it might not serve as a huge surprise that he wasn't at the peak of his race day fitness, but a lot of people, commentators, coaches, athletes and newspapers have thrown some really heavy criticism at Mo after what they considered a disappointing return to competition for the great athlete. The Telegraph put out a scathing article saying that Mo's future is in tatters after being beaten by this relatively unknown athlete by the name of Ellis Cross. But what we fail to acknowledge, and what perhaps the authors or the journalists in these articles fail to understand, is that a distance runner is not required to constantly be at the peak of their powers. In fact, a gradual build-up on the foundation of fitness that they might have laid down is often a better approach, and something that I think Mo Farah has really understood. As we said, 9 months away is no short amount of time, and the way that he ran in the early miles of this race suggested he wasn't 100% sure of where his race day fitness was at. Opposed to how we usually see him approach a race by taking it up to the field and dictating the pace with surges and then taking the foot off the accelerator, we quickly saw that Mo was quite content just to tuck into the middle of the field and feel his way through the race. This very tactic suggests that an athlete's not at the peak of their confidence when it comes to knowing what kind of race day fitness they hold, and something that I think a lot of journalists, athletes and coaches have overlooked with his return to this competition. In fact, one thing that we can learn from this is often a great approach to distance running performance is having an understanding of where it is that we're trying to be at a peak of our fitness by, what month is it in, and then gradually working our way towards that. We can see, and we've heard Mo Farah speak about how his main goal is the World Championships coming up in just a couple of months in Oregon. And though this wasn't the outcome that he had anticipated or hoped for, he said at the end of the race that he knew he wasn't at the peak of his powers. And as long as each and every race is a gradual improvement on this race, then he's in a pretty good situation. We also don't know about what quality of training he'd been doing going into this race. Had he tapered for this race? Was he in the middle of a 120-mile week? What kind of approach did he have into it? This is something that we're not hearing many journalists speak about when it comes to the performance of Mo. At the end of the race, there was a couple of points that he highlighted, saying that his base level speed wasn't super high. He didn't feel as though he had a really high quality ability to be able to change pace. He said he also felt a little more fatigued than he had anticipated feeling. But perhaps even more importantly than all of this, he admitted that he wasn't overly disappointed with this race because despite the speculation, the criticism that was undoubtedly going to come throughout this race, he knew that he wasn't at the peak of his powers. He said if he was at the peak of his powers and he was beaten, it would be a very different situation. But in fact, the positive take on this race was hard to look over, as he was just happy to be back in competition. He was happy for Alice, and he was also anticipating some pretty big breakthroughs over the next couple of months. So what can we take away from a race like this, from Olympic great Mo Farah? I mean, if he's failing to constantly be at the peak of his powers, surely that applies to us as well. Maybe you're the kind of athlete who's put too much pressure on yourselves over the last couple of months, last couple of years to constantly be running PBs, and you perhaps haven't taken into consideration the gradual build-up, which is so often a great approach to competitive running. There's a couple of things that I thought we could take away from this as competitive athlete. First of all, when's your goal race? That's the day that you need to be at the peak of your powers by. If you're at the peak of your powers 2 months before that race, that could have potentially, overstepped the mark of what you're going to be required to maintain for the next couple of months until you get out there for the big race. You can gradually, taking the approach of Mo Farah, just gradually build up the intensity, the pace, the distance, and the racing schedule going into your race. You can blow away the rust going into that race. Mo Farah here, it's a classic example of a rust buster. Whenever someone gets out to a race, they feel flat, they feel tired, they don't have a change of pace. It simply suggests that this athlete is just lacking a little bit of race fitness. I think it's going to be really interesting to watch his next 2 or 3 races, as I predict that we're going to see some really incredible breakthroughs in both the pace, the times, and the quality of performances that we're seeing from Mo. Let us know in the comments below. Keep your eyes on Mo. I think it's going to be exciting to watch what he produces in the next couple of months. And hey, make sure you come back and watch this video in a couple of months' time to see if I was right or way off the mark. All right, guys, happy running, and I'll see you all soon.